Good morning and welcome to a very special Better Business Bureau webinar. This is really a great event today. Today we have three of the most powerful voices in consumer protection in Chicagoland. And here to bring you more, we're going to kick off things by introducing you to our President and CEO, Steve Burness. Steve?
Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. For those who don't know the Better Business Bureau, we are a nonprofit organization, been protecting both consumers and businesses for over 94 years in Chicago and Northern Illinois. Our core mission is to help consumers find businesses they can trust, which has never been more important during this pandemic crisis we're currently under. The BBB seal is a sign of a better business. So next time you're looking for great organizations, please look for the BBB seal when you buy or sell. Again, in my 34 years, my biggest frustration in my career has been from consumers who don't contact the Better Business Bureau first or other organizations and call us afterwards. Please lean on us for educational information about our services. You can go to bbb.org. And there will be a lot of information there you can grab from there. We're very honored today to have longtime partners, two of them, Casso, the Midwest Director of the Federal Trade Commission Midwest Region, and we have Rosa Escareno. We'll be hearing from both of them in a few minutes. She's with the Commissioner of the Business Affairs and Consumer Protection for the City of Chicago. We're happy to take your questions. If you've seen the chat box on your right side, should be a question box. Through the duration of the webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in and make sure you hit send. If we are unable to get to all of our questions, you can easily, at the end of it, email us at questions@chicago.bbb.org, and we will answer them or send them to one of the panelists that you're hearing from today. So basically, I wanted to start a little bit about the BBB, simply seeing scams. We're doing our best to help consumers become educated during this crisis. Following the news of continuously inventing new ways to take care of the problems we're seeing, we try to educate consumers before that. Consumers need to find businesses they can trust, and for over 100 years, the BBB has been there to help consumers in many ways. There are so many things that we're seeing in the marketplace today. But the first thing I want to let you know is that we are open. We are fully operational. The BBB has been there the whole time. The levels of contacting us has been astronomical, and we're thankful for consumers to reaching out to us to find businesses they can trust, but also more importantly is getting education on these particular organizations and education on the scams itself as well. We're seeing, first of all, we're seeing a lot of business email compromise scams. They include emails going to your employees, pretending that there's somebody else or a boss or a vendor asking you to send money. So be very, very careful of those particular situations. And any type of, asking for money, unconventional methods, either buying gift cards or, any type of, wiring money. Those are the types of scams we're seeing. Be careful of the emails you're getting, especially if it's coming from your boss, because these scammers have found ways to trick you into doing that. So be careful, and maybe the phone call to that person to determine they're really authentic, that it's truly they wanted you to send something to you. Because clicking on those emails can have disastrous effects on your computers, as you know. Any type of unconventional methods to payment, that's always a concern of us. Wiring money, that's a sign of a ripoff. Somebody asks you to wire money. And if somebody asks you to do something quickly within 30 minutes, that's usually an indication of a scam as well. The only thing you should do in 30 minutes is buy a pizza. Everything else, take your time and become educated. Again, we're seeing a lot of work from home hackers and scammers. It makes you more vulnerable because if you're on your corporate devices, which may not have the protection that you would have sitting in your office. There's our firewalls and security and software there to help you, but make sure that you are clicking on a legitimate link. If you're not expecting something from somebody, make sure that you determine whether or not that is a legitimate email by maybe even calling them. I'd rather you call them first before clicking on a link, because the scammers have found a way to trick you into thinking that there's somebody else. And always be wary of urgent calls, alerts right away, because they don't want you to think. They want you to click on that link right away. So be careful on those particular situations. There's a big surge in text scams that are offering free protection for the computers and malware. So be very, very careful because scammers can infect your computers with malware and viruses and things of that nature. So please don't click on any links or attachments from unknown senders. That's how they gain access to your computer, and they are coming through your phones as well. They can take control of your phone. As you see, they will give you a warning sign or something of urgent nature, and you click on that, and guess what? You can lock your phone up, and they can hold it hostage then, and then make you pay a ransomware. So our big concern is do not clicking on those links. If you want to go to a website directly, please go to the website directly by keying in that information and ignore any instructions to stop text or no, because they think then they'll know it's a valid email or a valid link that you can click on. So be very careful of that, and we don't want you to harm your computer or obviously harm your phone in any way. We are seeing a resurgence of fake pop-up websites, that are out there, especially, selling masks or, any other types of material, medical supplies, health products. They all say they have it, but they want your information or they want your credit card, and they're not a real company. So you got to be very careful of that. Facebook released information. So for first part of the year, January, February, March, they took down 1.7 billion fake pages, 1.7 billion in 3 months. So that just tells you the volume of scammers that are out there or trying to take advantage of the situation. And we have scammers who are trying to impersonate the World Health Organization or Centers for Disease Control. There's a lot of fake news out there, so you got to be careful that you're getting it from a reliable source, and make sure you go to the site directly. Don't follow those links because they look authentic, but they're actually not. The Better Business Bureau is also seeing a lot of increase in fake phone calls and phishing emails as well, offering you, these test kits or, treatments, or asking for information about your credit card for shipping and things of that nature. So be very careful of any fake phone calls and phishing emails. Make sure you do your due diligence. And we're seeing charities, asking for donations when they're not actually charity. We want you to give, but give wisely. And make sure that you do your checking on those particular charities or financial relief. Even we got fake websites that, saying they use your airlines and we're giving you a refund, we need information. You got to determine the validity of that particular email. Make sure it is a valid email. And you may want to deal directly with the organization itself because there's so many fake calls out there right now. And we suggested also is you may want to let that call go to voicemail. Most scammers, and again, not all, but most, won't leave voicemails. I get a lot of fake calls a day myself, and I tend not to leave voicemails. So if they do leave a message, make sure you can check them out first and put their phone number and anything in there as well. Be careful of that because phone calls and scams has really been increasing on that. Also, we want people looking for companionship. This is unbelievable that the scammers are taking advantage of consumers this time of the year. Usually these appear around the holidays, but we're getting people looking for companionship and are coming across puppy scams. As you know, the BBB in 2017 issued a study on fake puppy scams where you go online and these people say they have these puppies and they show you adorable pictures like you're seeing there, only to realize that they're not a valid site. They have no dogs to deliver, and they keep taking your money more and more until you basically run out of money or realize you're being duped. So be careful of the ads online for fake puppies, even though they look real. And this puppy here you see here has been used on many different sites as well. You can reverse click on a website, on a Google search rather, to look at that picture and to see if it's running anywhere else. You'd be surprised. These great looking puppies, these beautiful puppies with the puppy eyes and looks are being utilized by the scammers in many ways, especially on the breeds that are very hard or sought after. So be very careful on that. In March and April, we've had over 300 reports come to our scam tracker. So it's important for you to make sure that you review the scam tracker before you buy or hire. and to report it, and help us and help the authorities. You help the governmental agencies as well. Even if you don't fall victim to it and you say to yourself, you know what, that's a scam, it's a fake, but somebody will fall for it, unfortunately. So it's important to please report to Scam Tracker if you see a scam. But more importantly, use Scam Tracker as your advantage ahead of time. And what I mean by that is, if, for instance, the IRS calls you, you can put in IRS in a scam tracker and see what scams are related to that. Again, it's not the IRS scamming you, it's people using the IRS's name. So this scam tracker allows you to see scams across North America, where they're happening, additionally in Mexico and Canada. So if you see an offer or waterproofing, automobiles, you can put anything in Scam Tracker, and it'll show you the scams attributed to those particular industries, because every industry has scams. I don't care what industry you're talking about, there's always a bad actor in every industry who are trying to take advantage of you in some way. The best protection is education, because it's so important to know about these scams and to research these organizations. And 90% of all reports to our Scam Tracker in April were on fake COVID-19 websites. As I mentioned earlier, these sites are appearing at alarming rates. It's like the whack-a-mole game. One site comes down, another site will come up, and they come up within minutes sometimes. And just because you can't find anything online about these particular scams or organizations doesn't make them a good company. A lot of times consumers said to the Better Business Bureau, well, I did some checking and I couldn't find anything, so that must be good news. It's not. Unfortunately, sometimes you want to find information about the organization, and more importantly, I'd rather you call the Better Business Bureau or the governmental agencies that we're talking about. There's some links here on your screen that you can use. The bbb.org has everything about the Better Business Bureau. Underneath there's the Scam Tracker. And then we also want information about price gouging on Ad Truth. So if you do see information about an organization that might be price gouging in some way, please report it to the Better Business Bureau, because we can help this prevent something from happening to somebody else. And we have a plethora of information online about coronavirus and things you'll hear today from Rosa and Todd. But more importantly, all this information is up there. We'd rather you check ahead of time. Again, I mentioned in my 34-year career, my biggest frustration has been for consumers calling us after. There's so much information out there, you'll hear it from others, but please review these websites, review these organizations before giving them your money. Just because they have a business license doesn't make them a good business. There's a lot of information out there, and we hate to see you come to us at the end when it's too late, we can't help you, or you sent your money. So there's a lot of things that you're gonna hear about these scams, but the biggest tip off, as I say to the rip off, is asking for something to do within 30 minutes, quickly. They don't want you to think about it. They want you to act on it as quick as possible, not asking anybody and doing something. You shouldn't act that quickly. You should do some research, check these organizations with the Better Business Bureau, the other governmental agencies, and there's so much information that is provided to them. Again, today we have great resources up here, as I mentioned to you, but we're also honored to have Todd Casso, the Midwest Regional Director of the Federal Trade Commission. There's one of the top federal agencies in the U.S. that actually helps consumers. They do a lot of work. You don't hear about some of their successes. Unfortunately, I do. Let me tell you, Todd is a very busy man this time of the year. He's always busy, but they do great work at the Federal Trade Commission. It's an honor for them to be with us today. They have their Midwest director and all the work they do for us. So I want to applaud Todd for your services that you do to help protect consumers and put the bad guys out of business and shut them down. Right now, I'd like to turn it over to Todd to explain some of the things that they're seeing at the Federal Trade Commission. Todd?
Thanks so much, Steve. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the webinar today. I want to spend some time talking with you today about the many and various kinds of scams that the FTC has been seeing related to the coronavirus. So as Steve said, my name is Todd Casso, and I'm the director of the Federal Trade Commission's Midwest Region office in Chicago. And the FTC is thrilled to be partnering today with the Better Business Bureau and the City of Chicago's Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. And thanks so much to the BBB for hosting this webinar, and to all of you for joining us this morning. So for those of you who may not be familiar with us, the FTC is the nation's consumer protection agency. Our mission is to combat deceptive and unfair practices in the marketplace, both through law enforcement and through education. And my office is one of 8 regional offices the FTC has throughout the United States. We're based right here in Chicago, and we cover 11 states in the Midwest, all the way from Kentucky to the Dakotas. So one thing we know from all health emergencies and natural disasters is this, that scammers are going to follow the headlines. They take advantage of what may be occurring in the news to find new ways to get consumers to part with their money or their personal financial information. And the current coronavirus pandemic is no exception. We saw pretty quickly that scammers were going to use this health crisis to play on consumers' fears to perpetrate a whole slew of both old and new scams. And the FTC is very interested in hearing from all of you about the types of COVID-19 related scams that you're encountering in the marketplace. Please report them to the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint. So the FTC maintains a database of consumer fraud and identity theft complaints called Consumer Sentinel. And that database includes complaints that are submitted directly to my agency, the FTC, as well as complaints submitted to other agencies like Attorney General's offices around the country and Better Business Bureaus. So those organizations share the complaints they receive with our Consumer Sentinel network, and that way Consumer Sentinel becomes a one-stop shop of fraud and identity theft complaints that's accessible to law enforcers here in Illinois and all across the United States. Now, thus far, Consumer Sentinel has received more than 55,000 reports about COVID-related scams, and those complaints report more than $40 million in losses. And we'll talk in a minute about the most common complaints and scams that we're seeing. From consumers here in Illinois, we've thus far received nearly 1,600 reports of COVID-related scams. And at the FTC, we always say that reported fraud is just the tip of the iceberg of the actual fraud that exists in the marketplace. So we know the issue is much larger than only those complaints that we're receiving. So let's talk about some of the scams that we're seeing. First and most importantly are fake treatments and cures. Everything from miracle cures and vaccine offers and home testing kits to scams that target people on Medicare. And in a few minutes, we'll talk about what the FTC in conjunction with the FDA are doing about these claims of fake cures and treatments. But the takeaway tip is this: you should ignore online and telephone offers for vaccinations, tests, or cures. As you know, at this point, there are no vaccines or cures for COVID-19. So you know that any claim to the contrary is simply false. But right now, as Steve mentioned, scammers are out there hawking bogus products to prevent, treat, or cure the coronavirus. And if you see that type of ad, you should simply stop and think to yourself if there's actually been a medical breakthrough. Are you really going to hear about it for the first time from an ad or a sales pitch on Facebook or something that you receive in a text message or an email? The answer to that is clearly no. So train yourself to just ignore those types of false ads. And if you're on Medicare, you might get calls, emails, or see ads that claim to give you special access, either to testing kits or to treatments. But that's not how Medicare works. Medicare representatives are never going to call you to offer special access or to put you in line for a test or treatment. Anyone who purports to be acting on behalf of Medicare and makes that type of offer is a scammer. Next slide, please. Scammers are also sending emails and text messages that are trying to get your personal information, your money, or to load malware onto your computer. And the slide shows an example of a fake World Health Organization email that would put malware on your computer if you clicked on the blue box to download safety measures. So here's the tip: don't click on links in emails or text messages from sources that you don't know. Doing so could download a virus onto your computer or other device. Next, let's talk about robocalls. Scammers have been quick to adjust their robocalls to try to take advantage of consumers' fears about the pandemic. We're seeing robocalls offering fake cures, prevention solutions, test kits, special access for Medicare recipients, health insurance, cleaning supplies, and the list goes on. But they're also tailoring their typical regular robocall scams. So we're seeing some Social Security Administration robocalls that now reference the coronavirus, telling consumers that their Social Security number has been suspended due to suspicious activity relating to the virus. We've also seen mortgage and student loan debt relief robocalls that mention relief programs purportedly relating to the COVID-19 situation. So here's what you can do to avoid falling victim. Simply hang up on illegal robocallers. Then block the number that appeared on your caller ID using the blocking service on your phone or provided by your carrier. Then report the call to the Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov/complaint. An important thing to remember with robocalls: don't press any numbers. The recording might say that pressing a number will let you speak with a live operator or remove you from their call list, but it's more likely to lead to more robocalls instead. So when you pick up the phone and encounter a robocall, just hang up. So here's another headline that scammers are definitely following. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, Economic Act, or CARES Act, provides financial help for individuals. That's the Economic Impact Program or stimulus checks that you all have been hearing about. And you may have already received one of these checks. But criminals use that type of headline to make their phony pitches sound more credible. Here's what you need to know. If someone calls or emails you out of the blue, claiming that there's money available from a government agency, but you have to make an upfront payment or provide some personal or financial information in order to get the money, hang up the phone. The government won't ask you to pay to get your stimulus check, nor will they call and ask for sensitive information like your bank account number or your Social Security number. Scammers are simply trying to take advantage of the fact that consumers have heard about these checks, not sure exactly how or when they're going to be distributed. So ignore anyone who calls, texts, or emails to quote unquote help you get money from the government. So let's go over the facts on who's actually getting a stimulus check. Next slide, please. Taxpayers who filed a 2018 or 2019 tax return are eligible for full payments if they have incomes below certain thresholds: $75,000 for individuals, $112,500 for a head of household, or $150,000 for married couples. Now, when the CARES Act was first passed, there was a lot of confusion about eligibility for individuals who don't file taxes or otherwise have no taxable income, including Social Security recipients and supplemental security income recipients. The Treasury Department has now clarified, however, that Social Security and SSI recipients are eligible for payments just like everyone else. And people with no taxable income are eligible too. So how much will you get? Next slide, please. Most people are going to get $1,200 or $2,400 per couple, although some will get less depending on their income. To receive an economic impact payment for children, parents or guardians must claim the child as a dependent. Parents will receive $500 per qualifying child under the age of 17. Young adults, like college students, can't get the payment themselves if someone else claims them as a dependent. So how will you get your payment? If you filed taxes in 2018 or 2019, or you don't file taxes but do get Social Security payments, you don't have to do anything to get your payment. This covers the vast majority of people. The government already has the information it needs to determine eligibility and to send you your money. For Social Security and SSI recipients, the IRS will use direct deposit information on file with the Social Security Administration, and payments will arrive automatically. Taxpayers without direct deposit on file with the IRS will receive a check in the mail automatically. Likewise, if you get a paper check from Social Security, you'll receive a paper check from the IRS. Again, automatically. Now, what if you typically don't file a tax return? How will you get your payment then? In limited circumstances, the IRS will take information through an online portal located at irs.gov/coronavirus. Look for the link, non-filers enter payment info here. To get their payments, non-filers are required to fill out a short form to submit to the IRS through the online portal. People who get benefits from Social Security do not need to use this online portal. Please be very careful if you're going to use the online portal, however. The portal will take you to a .com website that's used for free e-filings, but make sure you always get to this portal through the IRS's website and never through a hyperlink in a text or an email. That's because the form is going to require that you provide sensitive personal information and financial information like your Social Security number and your bank account number. Now, within 15 days after the economic impact payment being made, either through direct deposit or you receiving a paper check, the IRS is going to be mailing a letter to the taxpayer's last known address. And the letter is going to provide information on how the payment was made and how to report it if you didn't receive the payment. So if you receive that letter, but you haven't yet received your stimulus funds, then you know there's a problem that you need to investigate. Next slide, please. I also wanted to bring to your attention a blog post that the FTC issued 2 weeks ago after hearing reports from a number of state attorney general's offices, including the Illinois Attorney General's offices, that some nursing homes and assisted living facilities were telling patients who were on Medicaid that they needed to sign over their stimulus payments to the facility. That is wrong. And if that's happened to you or to a loved one, you should contact your state attorney general and ask the facility to give back the payment. Under the CARES Act, the stimulus payment is treated like a tax credit. And as a result, it's not considered a resource for purposes of federal government programs like Medicaid. Thus, the nursing home or other facility can't seize the stimulus payment simply because the resident is on Medicaid. So that's the economic impact payments. Now let's talk about law enforcement. An important part of the FTC's work is targeting companies that make claims without the scientific proof to back them up. And during the pandemic, the FTC's attorneys and investigators have been working closely with the Food and Drug Administration to find the companies who are peddling the fake cure, treatment, and prevention products that I mentioned earlier. The two agencies have sent warning letters to a number of companies, giving them 48 hours to report back on how they'll address the concerns raised. Once a letter is sent, both the FTC and the FDA then watch to make sure that the claims really are removed. We watch social media, online marketplaces, and complaints to our Consumer Sentinel network to make sure the companies really have cut it out. And we're happy to report that the response to our warning letters has been very good. The companies have adjusted their advertising to remove the claims that we were concerned about. All told, thus far, the FTC has sent close to 120 warning letters to companies making false cure, treatment, or prevention claims. We've also announced the filing of a lawsuit against a California company that claimed that a vitamin C supplement could treat or prevent the coronavirus. And the defendants in that case have already agreed to a court order preventing that sort of claim in the future. The FTC is also tackling illegal coronavirus robocalls. So since the pandemic began, FTC staff has sent 15 letters to companies that help scammy telemarketers, warning those companies about the penalties for doing so. These are providers of voice over internet protocol or VoIP services, companies that transmit illegal robocalls or carry them for telemarketers. The last two sets of letters the FTC sent jointly with the Federal Communications Commission. They were sent to companies who we knew had transmitted robocalls offering fraudulent COVID-19 home testing kits or claiming that their HVAC services will help fight the virus, among other claims. And the letters gave the companies 48 hours to stop transmitting these calls, and if they didn't, then the FCC is going to authorize US voice providers to block all calls from those companies. So that's another way that the FTC, working with our partners, has been disrupting robocallers who are trying to take advantage of the pandemic. And the last thing I'd like you to encourage you to do is to stay informed. One way that we can all help each other in times like this is by sharing good, trustworthy resources when we find them. And I hope you'll share the information on this slide in your community. You can keep up to date with the latest scams by signing up for the FTC's consumer alerts. Visit ftc.gov/subscribe in order to do so. As I mentioned earlier, we also want to get your complaints. Your reports really do matter to the FTC, to all the law enforcers who have access to our Consumer Sentinel network, and to the people in your community who you help each time you report a scam. So please, whenever you spot a suspicious claim or anything you think might be a scam, tell the FTC at ftc.gov/complaint. Thank you for your time and attention today. Next slide, please. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the FTC using any of the resources on the slide. And now I'd like to introduce Rosa Escarino, Commissioner of the City of Chicago's Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you, Todd.
Yep,
So,
Rosa, we can
thank you.
hear you. We can't see you.
Oh, once I thought you were going to share my webcam. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, hi. Thank you, everybody. And so happy to be here. So yes, I'm the commissioner with the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection here in Chicago. The Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection not only regulates businesses in Chicago, but we are also charged with ensuring that we protect consumers from consumer fraud and consumer scams. Just a big shout out to Todd and Steve. We work very closely with the FTC as well as the Better Business Bureau in making sure that we are triaging many of the complaints that we get here at the City of Chicago. So just so you know, here at the City of Chicago, we have a team of investigators and attorneys that are charged with prosecuting the many complaints that we get every year. We get roughly 1,200 complaints every year on everything ranging from motor vehicle repair, home repair fraud, booting, and or towing where vehicles are held quote unquote hostage. And so we work very closely with all these agencies to make sure that we're maximizing the penalties when we do identify a case that we can actually prosecute here at the city. Most importantly, if you could take anything away from my presentation, is that if you are in Chicago, if you are a resident or a business and you feel that you are being scammed, certainly you should call 311 and you should report it. The fines can range up to $10,000 per violation. And I just want to talk a little bit about the way that the City of Chicago process some of these complaints. First, we start out with a complaint. When we get a complaint, and I know we're going to talk a lot about what we're hearing during COVID, and I'm inspired by what you've already heard through Steve Burness and Todd Casso, so that you understand that right now is a very important time for you to be vigilant about all the different fake companies and or individuals that may be trying to take advantage of vulnerable individuals. But here's how we work to process many of these complaints that we get. we get a complaint, we have an investigation team that actually first looks to see if we have a business that is or is not legit. And if it's operating in Chicago, because we have Chicago jurisdiction. If it isn't, then we have these partnerships with the state, with the feds, and the Better Business Bureau so that we can communicate what we're hearing. And we also have a task force that we're a part of where we, on a pretty regular basis, communicate what we're seeing, what we're hearing, and so that we're communicating these kinds of issues with the multiple agencies so that it's not just the city working together. But what we do is, because we also regulate the businesses in Chicago, is that we make sure that if it is a business in Chicago, that we're actually cross-referencing the business. If it's a licensed business, the implications can be huge. As you can imagine, a business can actually lose their license to operate in the city of Chicago. But also, one of the things that we try to do is that we do not represent the individual or the complainant. What we do is we target the bad actor, or we go after the company that is making false claims and or fraudulent. And in that process, our prosecutors, if it's a legitimate business that just happens to be misstating something or is making a claim, we can actually get that business to either do it voluntarily or we'll see them in court. But in doing so, one important factor for us is that we want that business to make the consumers whole. So where we identify a business that is, and many of the complaints that we get are actually businesses that just didn't know that whatever the claim they were making was actually confusing or was defrauding people, or in many of these cases we even find ourselves that it's just marketing that has gone a little bit too far. But our goal is always to try to figure out if we can use our strong regulatory arm to actually see if we can make consumers whole. So I just wanted you to know that we cannot begin an investigation if we don't have, number one, a complaint, and number two, a signed complaint. So if you feel that you've been defrauded, and it's interesting, I came in this morning and the cleaning crew was in here and they actually gave me a story about a particular situation that they were involved in, took my card. I said, well, did you file a complaint? You need to file a complaint, and then you need to actually sign a follow-up and have it signed so that we can actually follow through and prosecute. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview so that you understand how we operate here in the city. Okay, I'll go to the next slide. So again, as I was indicating, what we have identified, and both Steve and Todd had covered this, a lot of false advertisement related to COVID, a lot of claims of COVID, being basically the solution for how to address COVID or fix COVID or medicate COVID. Any sale of products or services that are intentionally false or that make statements that guarantee some solution specifically on COVID, then first of all, number one, be aware. Anything that is making those claims, you have to be very careful. As Todd indicated, you should not be the solution to COVID shouldn't be coming through you to you from an email or from a product that you go to at your local store that is sitting on the counter that says this is a solution to address COVID, or this is how you are going to feel better as a result of COVID. Those are generally false claims. If you find that, if you identify that, this is what we need. We actually need you to take a picture. We also need the address of the location that may be promoting that or advertising that. What we see a lot where Todd and the BBB, or the Federal Trade Commission, as well as the Better Business Bureau, they're dealing with the cases. One of the things that we deal a lot with is the person that actually walks into a small convenience store and identifies a bunch of products that are actually probably handmade by someone, could actually even be that retailer. And so for us, what's important is take that picture, make sure you get the business information, and then you need to call it into 311. Obviously, if you have taken a product and it's made you ill, certainly call 911, but also that evidence is extremely important. Many people often actually will take a product, will make them sick, and they will never bother to call 311. They will never even bother to go beyond the point. They go to the hospital, they go to the doctor, and then they never follow through. So what happens is then we have a reaction or an impact to multiple people being defrauded. So please make sure that you report that. Also, one of the things that we have seen during COVID is that we have actually seen an increase in price. This year already, just in the 3 months, we have seen a 600 complaints on price gouging alone. Now, on average, as I said in the beginning, we get 1,200 complaints a year. So getting 600 complaints in less than 3 months is actually quite a bit of complaints. And we investigate every complaint. There is some misinformation or misunderstanding as to what price gouging really is. And one of the things that we are, so for example, there's a good example of what price gouging is and what it isn't. So we got a complaint, 12 roll of paper, toilet paper of a particular brand was selling for $20+, something that would normally sell for probably under $10 or maybe like $6 or $7. Now it's like $27, $28. That's price gouging, okay? Then here's another example of something we are seeing a lot more frequently and hearing a lot more frequently. Because of COVID, what has happened is there has been a chain reaction in the increase of cost. So for example, a local restaurant, and I was on a call yesterday with a restaurateur, a local restaurant that previously, before COVID, was paying $2.70 at the most, $2.70 at the most for a pound of meat. Right now, she is paying $7 for a pound of meat. And so I asked her, we looked into it, and it turns out that the plant where she was getting the meat from, that particular plant was working with a very reduced number of employees. But the demand was so high that the company had to increase the price of meat. And so here's an example where we're getting a complaint of a price gouging, but you could see how COVID is having a chain reaction impact on prices. And so you are going to start to see some price increases with some moderation when you go to the grocery store, when you're going to your local restaurant. And so I wanted to make that clear because we are seeing a lot of our complaints are related to increasing of the price due to, a higher demand, yet fewer employees, fewer work product actually being done because of the impact of COVID. And so that not only when you're going to the store and shopping, you're going to probably see a slight increase on certain items, and that is probably the case. But I don't want you to stop calling 311 if you see something like a small bottle of hand sanitizer that would maybe run $2, maybe at an increase could be maybe $4. Maybe that's already a little high to me. But if you're now charging $10 for what used to be $2, that may be more price gouging, and then we can look into that. So I wanted you to be aware of where we're seeing these price disparities. As I've indicated, another area that we're seeing some price disparities is in the actual receipts. Now, this particular restaurant that I just mentioned, one of the things that she resorted to was actually imposing a COVID surcharge, and she imposed it on the receipt. And we're seeing a lot of these cases where restaurants, it's actually much more expensive for some of these restaurants to change the prices on all their products than it is to just charge a surcharge. Well, the problem with that is when you put it in the receipt, it could actually be perceived as a tax. When it's perceived as a tax, now it's a violation. You cannot do that. Now, we tell businesses, and if you're a business and you are being hit by COVID and you have to increase your prices, it is always important that if you are informing the customer before the transaction is completed, that you are going to be adding a service fee or a fee because of the additional charges. Make sure that it is not considered a tax, and make sure that you are being transparent with the consumer as to what you are overcharging them for. Not overcharging them, I'm sorry, what that additional fee may be for. Because the customer should know that that fee is because you have seen an increase in price, but at being a good business, you've actually kept all your prices at the same level as pre-COVID, but because of the additional cost to you as a business, that you are actually imposing an additional service fee. Those additional service fee must be transparent to the consumer. The consumer must be willing to make a determination as to whether they want to shop from you or they prefer to go somewhere else. And so that's a business decision. But please be very careful, because these charges that can be misconstrued as taxes are actually very, very concerning for us. And we want to make sure that that practice is very clearly understood in the marketplace. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So just overall, when we see normal business complaints throughout the year, I mentioned those already. Our top complaints are home consumer fraud with home repair. Please make sure, and I know that you've heard it already from everybody on the webinar, but I cannot stress it enough. You should not be paying for services unless you have a contract. And you should not be signing a contract unless you understand the terms of that contract. Do not pay somebody for services that have not been yet rendered. Make sure that when you make a payment, especially right now, if you have individuals that are sick in your home and there are cleaning companies that are making claims that they're going to come in and disinfect your home, that's great. But if you're make sure you know what you're paying for, what you're being charged, and what you're getting yourself into. Again, as Todd and Steve already indicated, ignore unsolicited calls, texts, and emails. We hear, especially for vulnerable populations like our senior population, we're hearing that they continue to be the targets of many of these scams. So please be careful, ignore them. No one is going to, the government is not going to call you. Your utility companies are not going to call you directly and say, pay me now. They're going to send you something in the mail, and they're going to have your information. Do not share your personal information. So many people are doing this. I hear it all the time here, and it is unfortunate. Not only are you sharing your information, but you're also not getting the details from who you're sharing your information with. So we don't even know where to start many of these claims. And this is not the time to be giving your personal information and or sharing any details about your household, the people in your household, because this is a very, very critical time for all of us. And again, make sure that you vet all the organizations that you're donating to, make sure they're legitimate. If you're doing business with any business, our portal has all our licensed businesses are already on our portal. It's part of our business transparency. You can identify whether a business is currently licensed or not. And for contractors, we work closely with our Department of Buildings. They have a list of contractors that are properly licensed with the city. Make sure that you're taking their permit number, their license number. You should request that before entering into any agreements with anyone. And please remember, always call 311 and provide us as much information. Again, we are here to service you. Please visit us on our website at chicago.gov/BACP COVID-19 for anything COVID, or just reach out to us at Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, and if you have any specific questions. So thank you again. And I think we're opening it up for questions now.
Yes, at this time I'm also gonna invite our other panelists to come back up on screen. There we go. So we've got a few questions from the audience that I'm going to share with our panelists, and I'm not sure who will necessarily be most equipped to answer specific questions, but if you feel that one speaks to you specifically, go ahead and jump on it. Our first question is, should we report scams even if we don't lose money?
I think we're all three. Absolutely.
Yes.
I'll start. Yeah, as I mentioned, we have Scam Tracker. Please, if you see a scam and you realize that somebody may fall for it, somebody will, please report it to BBB Scam Tracker. And it lets us know that the scam's happening, prevent this from happening to others, but it also goes into the database that the government agencies have access to, the Centennial database, so the authorities can look at it. But please don't ever say nobody will fall for it, because somebody will, and please report it. The only way to put scammers out of business is not to give them your business, unless we got to know about these scams. Todd?
Yeah, we get a lot of complaints, especially from older consumers, reporting frauds where they haven't lost any money. And it's a great thing to do. It helps protect people in your community, lets us know what you've encountered, and we can take action, before hopefully too many people lose money.
And then I'll just add to this, when you actually tell us about an individual that is scamming, we have a licensing database also where we hear a lot of this in our shared housing or your Airbnbs and HomeAways, where people are renting out apartments, for example, and where they're holding events and other things. If you know who's actually doing that, we need to know, because not only are we going to make sure that they are never going to be allowed to hold themselves out for certain business activities, and we cannot prevent these scammers or stop them, as Steve and Todd have indicated, unless we have their information. But we can actually prevent them from applying for licenses and prevent them from continuing this bad activity.
And one thing also to do is also, if you do have a valid complaint, to please come forward with those complaints as well, whether it's a scam or not. That it could be bad business practices, and all three of our agencies do handle those particular complaints to help you resolve the matter. So many times consumers, as I've been doing this for a long time, 30, 40 years, they've told us that, write it off to experience. But you shouldn't write it off to experience. You should get the help from one of our agencies and get these complaints addressed. And it's that one vote mentality that one complaint won't matter. It will. Please complain on a regular complaint as well.
Great. Our next question is, would you please briefly go over the COVID surcharge once more?
Sure. So under COVID, if you are a business, so I'll give you the example of the restaurateur. She could not increase her prices because it was more expensive to change the menus. And so if she is going to be having a charge in front of her counter, she should say today, and this shouldn't be done when the person checks out, is when they're actually purchasing. They can either increase their prices. Absolutely, she can say, we're actually charging $1 more for everything, but the consumer may know that in advance. You should not be putting those items in the receipt unless, like, for example, you say, you should not call it a COVID surcharge. You should call it a service fee. And then inside your establishment, you should be able to point to where that service fee was already communicated to the customer. Because if we get the complaint and we get that receipt, we're going to go back to the business and ask for proof as to when that customer was told that that service fee was something that they were engaging in. So notify, let the customers know exactly what you're doing, and the customer must agree to that.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question is, as businesses open up, if they are violating safe distancing or mask policies, who should we contact?
So we are suggesting that they call 311. There are guidelines that we've worked with all business industries. We've had about 200 individuals help us create guidelines for every single industry. And so these are guidelines. Now, guidelines are different from regulations. So guidelines are important so that the business community have a stake in making sure that they're providing safety regulations. But then there are regulations that are covered under the governor's order or under our health commissioner's order. And so I would suggest call 311. We have taken all the calls. We have about 15,000 calls that have come in just on essential, non-essential businesses. So I would say if you feel that a business is not following either a guideline or a regulation, just call us. We will communicate with the business. And if it's a guideline, we will remind them that they're supposed to follow guidelines. If it's a violation, we'll come out and we can actually cite a business for that.
Excellent. Our next question is, what if we're having issues with a company and go to the BBB and don't see a business profile? What does that mean, and where else can we look?
Well, I think the key to that is if you, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't see something on our site or anything on the web, doesn't make them a good company. It means that nobody's asked us to look at that particular organization or wasn't brought to our attention. So it's important that when we do have information on a business, we do develop a profile on them. So we'll ask for background information, licensing information, and things of that nature. So if you don't see something online at the BBB or any of these governmental agency sites, you can do some more due diligence yourself. And there's a couple things. One is to put the company's name in the search engines and put the word scam next to it, or a review, and get information about that firm and see what others have said. But more importantly is you want to find out about who that website, who owns it. So there's a registry, a worldwide registry, and it's who is. And if you type in who is, and then you go to that website, it's an international database of the registers of that domain. So that will tell you who registered that domain, and more importantly, when they registered it. So many times we see organizations popping up and they registered them yesterday, and that's why there's no information. There's a plethora of information online. I think consumers need to check. There's other, like the Federal Trade Commission, the City of Chicago, the Attorney General's office. All of us have databases that you should check on them. But again, so importantly, because consumers have told me all the time, is that I didn't see anything negative, but then I realized they're a bad company or they just started yesterday. So you got to be very careful you don't see anything as well, and make sure you check them out and you could trust them before you give them your money.
Excellent. I think this one will be for the BACP commissioner. Do we know when and how our restaurants and retail stores will reopen?
Yes, I believe the mayor will be announcing that shortly. And so what I've been telling businesses is that our timeline is going to be different from the governor. So the governor indicated that the state is going into phase 3 after May 29th, which is after tomorrow. What we will likely announce is one of two things. The mayor is going to announce a date that's going to go beyond that date. And so I'm also certain that there will be guidance to probably continue as we have been under phase 2 until we enter into phase 3. So that information is coming. It will come in the next couple of days. I mean, we have to provide guidance by tomorrow, but that's definitely coming. So I ask you to hang tight. There's a lot more information coming. We're going to have webinars starting Friday on all the industries and all the guidelines. So please make sure you go to our website. All of our webinars are on there, but I would suggest for industry specific and the guidelines, we're going to go through various, I think there's like 10 industries, and for every industry, we're going to have a webinar with the details of what the guidelines are. So please join us.
Fantastic. I will say to our attendees, if you have any other questions, submit them now. We're going to take questions for just a couple more minutes. I have another question here. It's a bit odd. I'm not sure if it's too granular, but I'll throw it to our panelists just to see what they think. This person is hoping that someone can provide a brief summary on licensing requirements and maybe speak a little bit more to how to get home repair contractor licensing in Chicago at this time.
Okay, so I'll take a stab at it. Is that okay? So number one is that we have two different kinds of license. One is a general contractor license, that a general contractor must be registered with our City of Chicago Department of Buildings, and it's called the GC license. And that's a general contractor license. I had some repairs done in my home. I requested it of my contractor. He had the general contractor license from the City of Chicago. There's also an online website where you can actually verify who is registered and who isn't. So if you go to our website, and actually if you can go to general contractors, it'll take you to our site or it'll take you to the Department of Buildings. The second part of that question is that our department issues home repair license. And these are individuals that actually are not doing plumbing, electrical, or HVAC. These are individuals that can essentially just paint, maybe knock down a wall, that do not require permits. So anytime that you are doing a project that's going to require permits, you're going to need a general contractor with a general contractor license. If you're just going to be doing painting, maybe knocking down a small wall, then that's going to require a home repair license, and that would be us. And all our licenses are on the portal, and you can get those. Many individuals, though, are not licensed, so I would ask you to do at least two things. Make sure that they have an insurance, a certificate of insurance, that they are licensed and bonded, and that you're keeping receipts of everything and copies of all the invoices that you're giving these individuals, because when they are not licensed, that makes it easier for us to find them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking a stab at that. I think that should be helpful for our attendees. And I believe at this point, we've pretty much gone through all of our questions. So I'll turn it over to our panelists, or Steve, if you want to make some closing remarks.
Thank you so much for everybody today for attending this webinar for us. We hope that this information was valuable to everybody. A big thank you to the Federal Trade Commission and Todd Coso, their regional director, has been very valuable to the BBB and very valuable to the consumers. And Rosa Escarino, thank you so much for all you've done. You're doing so much for the city. For the city of Chicago, you're everywhere it seems to be today. I don't know how you sleep. I don't know
We're
if you
just busy.
You're very busy, but you're doing great work for the great work for the citizens of Chicago. And thank you so much on behalf of everybody at the BBB for your time today. Very valuable. Again, if you have any questions you want to send to, please send it to questions@chicago.bbb.org, and we can send it to the panelists. Once again, Todd, thank you so much for coming today, and Rosa, thank you so much for today. Any parting words either one of you would like to say before we end this webinar?
I just want to thank the BBB for hosting. This has been really valuable, and we appreciate the partnership.
Thank you.
I want to echo that. Thank you guys so much for doing this. I think it's so important that we arm people with all the great information. And please don't be shy. To all of you who are out there, call in your complaints. And if it was nothing, then we'll just learn that it was nothing. But we certainly want to stop the scams and the fraud throughout the city and beyond. Thank you guys for your partnership.
Thank you so much, Rosa. Exactly. Please, if you see something, say something, complain to one of our agencies or all three of our agencies to help you and prevent this from happening to somebody else. Thank you for your time today. The webinar is now over, and we will send a survey out, please, at the end to let us know how we did and for any other webinars that you would like to see in the future. Thank you, everybody. The webinar is now over. You can log off. Thank you. Bye-bye.